Welcome to the Tyler Turner Show, presented by the Sportscast. Today's date, December 21st, 2020. If you haven't yet, please subscribe in all our channels, YouTube, Periscope, and on iTunes. If you're on iTunes, please leave us a review. It will help us out tremendously. Visit us at sportcast.net. Also follow us on Twitter at Sportscast1. And check out our app, the Sportscast, in the iOS App Store. Well, today I normally cover Big Ten and Pac-12, but when I have a guest on specific to a conference, I kind of just going to focus on that one. So today, without further ado, I have on Chris Courtney. He can go in. He has a website. It's called The Whole Flock of Ducks. Quote me if I'm wrong. The Whole flockofducks.com. He used to work for 247 Sports, and he is very definitely connected when it comes to Oregon. And Oregon's my team, so it's our lucky day. We get to talk about them, and they just won the Pac-12 title, which, I mean, come on, that's what it's all about. So, Chris, how are you doing today, man?
I'm great, Tyler. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem, man. So let's just get right into it. Friday night was the Pac-12 Championship, USC versus Oregon. Coming into the game, Oregon, it was obviously a very unique scenario. This whole season has been, and the Pac-12 probably has had the most unique of any conference in college football. Basically, it started off the week. It was supposed to be Washington versus USC, because Washington won the division title because, Washington couldn't play Oregon for who the winner was going to win the division, but then they couldn't play because Washington had a COVID outbreak. So then Washington was going to play USC, but then Washington had to cancel because they still were and did not have enough student athletes for the game against USC. So then Oregon pops in and takes its place. There's some scuttlebutt online. I probably follow it too much than I should. Probably should get a different hobby. And people are like annoyed, and they're like, why are they putting in the team that didn't deserve it? And I was the whole time thinking in my head and usually typing out and arguing with people on Twitter. I'm like, Washington deserved it. They didn't even play in the division game because they had a COVID outbreak. So no one deserved it. So by that logic, at least. And it was agreed upon by the presidents at the beginning of the year what they wanted to do. So I had no problem with it. And obviously the Pac-12 happens and championship happens. And guess who wins? Oregon. That's probably everyone's worst nightmare. And I personally, even though Oregon hadn't looked good, but I try to just look at things from a more just like, I guess, holistic, and I try to maybe more of a instead of always from on like, they've lost 2 games in a row. They've not looked so good this year. I was thinking more like Oregon always plays good when they play USC, when they play, at least under Cristobal, Washington, when they play in the bowl game. They have 2 weeks to prepare. They coming off 2 losses. They all of a sudden get this opportunity that they didn't think they're going to have. I'm like, I think they're going to come out and win it. I said that just before, and lo and behold, they do. What was your thoughts about the whole process, and more importantly, what were your thoughts about the game? And we can go into the game specifically, but what was your thoughts about the whole process, and then go into the game a little bit?
Yeah. In terms of the build up to the game, I mean, I don't think anybody. It's been hard to predict what's going to happen from week to week with COVID being what it is. So I think Oregon getting the opportunity. I don't think anybody, at least on the Oregon side, would ever argue that they necessarily deserved the opportunity. Then again, you could make an argument that look, Oregon didn't give the opportunity to play their way in to the game. I mean, it just so happened that Oregon was a healthier team in terms of the way that they were handling COVID. Washington wasn't able to go, and that's been look, like those things have been have happened quite a bit this year, where you've seen examples of that taking place, where a team just has to cancel. And so I guess credit Oregon for taking care of COVID and for kind of being on top of it like they were. I think Mario Cristobal would be the first one to tell you that the Ducks would probably prefer to earn their way in, but this is kind of the hand they were dealt. I don't think it's anyone's fault. I think Washington, I don't think, contrary to what I believe a lot of Duck fans were maybe saying on social media and elsewhere, I don't think Washington was ever ducking Oregon. I think, this was as harmful to their chances as it was anything else. I think that they were genuinely hoping to play that game. Didn't work out that way, and I think they were hoping to get healthy in time for the Pac-12 championship. That wasn't going to happen, and so kind of the Oregon falls into this spot. On paper, you look at Oregon's talent. I think they have underperformed this season on the whole. But kind of like you mentioned, this team has had a tendency to kind of play up and down to the caliber of their competition really since Mario Cristobal has ascended to head coach. I mean, you look at some of the losses that they have taken during his tenure, and some of them are pretty head scratching. I mean, you just point to the Oregon State and the Cal game this year as two examples where the Ducks just got outplayed by the other team, and it wasn't a matter of not having enough talent or anything like that. I think that this is a very young team. It's the youngest team in FBS right now. I think it's a team that lacks leadership, and I think it's a team that when it gets down or when things aren't going its way, they lack confidence in themselves sometimes. And we saw, I think, some elements of that in the USC game. But it's been a weird, odd season for everybody, and I you really can't stress that enough. And so even though Oregon has all this talent, not having a normal offseason to kind of coalesce, not having key leaders in key positions is a big thing. You think about who they had to replace. They had to replace Justin Herbert from a season ago. They had to replace 6 offensive line, five starters from a year ago. They had to replace Troy Dye and Bryson Young and Lamar Winston, 3 guys who were starting linebackers last year. They lost Javon Holland and Thomas Graham and Brady Breeze to opt-outs before this season. Those are all guys that they expected back. So look, like, Oregon's got a lot of talent, but they don't have a lot of experience. And so when you kind of couple all these things together, it makes sense why Oregon kind of has endured some struggles this year, even though they beat USC. I don't think it's necessarily a lock that they're going to show up and play their best football against a really good Iowa State team in the Fiesta Bowl. But it's certainly you like kind of some of the things that you've seen from the Ducks here in recent weeks, and particularly against USC in the Pac-12 championship game last Friday.
Yeah, to touch on a little bit about the youth. So I looked it up. So we have the youngest roster in the FBS. We have, is it FBS or Power 5? Can't remember. I believe
it's in FBS. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I know it's 79% underclassmen. So underclassmen being freshmen and sophomores, and there's only 21% that are juniors and seniors. I looked at, in comparison to last year's roster, there was 38% juniors and seniors to 62% underclassmen. So and I looked at most rosters, and it seemed to be like USC, for instance, was 37% this year, juniors and seniors. So 21%, that is a remarkably young, looks like 30 to 40 is the normal. And so to be at almost below 20% when it comes to having the amount of 20%, meaning you only have 20% upperclassmen on your roster, that is remarkably young. It's even before the opt-outs, we had only been at 27%. So it would have actually been, I know, because we were kind of getting a lot of buzz, and people were looking forward to the Ohio State game, and I do think we would have been better. Obviously, Panay Sewell, the best tackle in college football. You got Jevon Holland, one of the best nickels in college football. You got a 3-year starter in Thomas Graham. You got the Rose Bowl MVP in Brady Breeze. So you unquestionably lost 4 good players. But I do still think that if the season let's say, in a better universe, COVID never happens, I do think we would have maybe been a little bit overrated going into this year when I look at that, how young we still would have been. And Tyler Show would have still had growing pains. I think we were possibly a little bit overrated to going into the regular season anyways. And obviously then we had the opt-outs, and then all the other stuff that's happened with COVID that just, obviously puts you at disadvantage, especially when you're a younger team. So I do think really the youth is something that was not, I personally didn't even take that into consideration enough. I didn't look at how much youth we had.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were in that same boat too. I know I found myself in kind of a similar boat when assessing this team, kind of going into this season. And no one was really quite sure what the season was going to look like. But you think about the way that Oregon has been recruiting lately, and the way that they've just been kind of developing a lot of their talent. I think a lot of people, and then you juxtaposition that with just kind of the way the Pac-12 has been down in recent years. I think a lot of people expected Oregon to, even though they lost some very critical key figures from this team that, from a Rose Bowl team last year. I think a lot of people kind of just expected them on talent alone to be the favorite in the Pac-12, and to kind of for the season to play out, honestly, kind of the way that it ended up playing out, with Oregon being conference championship, the conference champion. I don't think people necessarily envision them, dropping games at Oregon State and DeKalb. But I think for the most part, I think a lot of people expected kind of this result to be the result, in a normal circumstance, in a normal season. And you throw in some of those non-conference games, which I think would have been really exciting. When you think about North Dakota State coming to Autzen, and then you think the following week Ohio State and Hawaii. That's a pretty great non-conference schedule, and non-conference home slate at that. So it would have been interesting to see how that played out. I don't think Oregon wins that Ohio State game, based on kind of what we have seen from the Ducks this season. It would have been a great atmosphere inside Autzen Stadium for that game, but we'll never know. But it's I think for the most part, though, the season kind of played out, I think, the way that a lot of people maybe were hypothesizing before the season. Again, some twists and turns along the way, but in the end, it kind of bared out the way that a lot of people expected.
Yeah, and I think next year, and next year when I look at it and I just put in a lot more math together, I think next year the expectations going into this year probably are better suited for next year, because next year we will have our starting quarterback coming back. We will have almost all our offensive line coming back. We're going to be bringing back quite a few skill guys. We're going to be bringing back our best defensive end, and probably the best defensive end in college football. We're going to be having both our linebackers. One was a 5-star in Noah Sewell. The other, Isaac Slade-Matsei, is one of the more productive linebackers in the conference. And then you're one of the best corners in the conference in Mikael Wright. So next year, when I look at it from like more of objective instead of, I just think as a fan, you tend to be subjective. I just think it's a struggle, and probably more people struggle than others. I really struggle. But when I look, I'm like, next year is where we still have to go to Ohio State and play Ohio State. So that's they're Ohio State. So, but other than that, I would say that next year is definitely where we will have the most talented roster in the conference. We will have a lot more experience coming back, especially at key positions. Like, you cannot really minimize having a new starting quarterback, especially a 4-year starter that he's replacing. And then all 5 of the offensive linemen had to be replaced. I mean, stuff like that is without spring ball. I mean, so this, when you really put it in a more context, you're like, man, some of those expectations that we probably had might have been just a little ridiculous based upon just, like I said, new quarterback, 5 new stars in the offensive line, no spring ball.
Right.
It's I think it was just a little bit, I would say the only disappointment that I can really say that still to me was a little baffling was we did return almost most of our defensive line and most of the front 7 guys, and their play in the first couple games was a little confusing to me, meaning that I just didn't think they're very physical. They were not. Jordan Scott wasn't playing as good as he did the other year. Austin Valier wasn't playing as good. Isaac Slade-Matsei, Mesa Funa. So I thought their play might have been the one area that I was kind of like, yeah, that maybe I don't understand that quite so much. But every other area, I think we maybe, when you put it into context of what really was going on and all the limitations with no spring ball, new quarterback, new offensive line, I think the rest, when you look at it from that kind of prism, it makes a lot more sense. What would you say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think certainly when you look at quarterback and offensive line, those are two positions that, they take time to gel. But what's funny, kind of when you look at the season, is the offense started off, pretty, pretty in sync and looking pretty steady for the most part. It was the defense that was kind of leaving a lot of people kind of scratching
Yeah.
their heads. I think a lot of people expected Oregon's defense to kind of be not kind of. I mean, I think a lot of people expected them to certainly be the best defense in the Pac-12 and potentially one of the best, defenses in the entire country. And that's even when you lose, someone like Javon Holland and Brady Breeze and Thomas Graham to opt-outs, you still think that this is a defense that is going to be pretty dominant in the Pac-12, and they weren't. I mean, you bring up a great point about kind of especially Oregon's run defense. I mean, they were getting gashed through the first, 3 or 4 weeks of the season. The UCLA game and the Oregon State game, those two games really stand out to me when I think about just how kind of exposed that group was. They didn't play with a lot of push. There wasn't a lot of physicality. They look slow. It was pretty revealing. And it really kind of went to show you, the importance of an off season and the importance of some of the guys that they lost too. I think, we overlook kind of the leadership element of some of these things too. And when you look at Troy Dye and Javon Holland, those are two guys who are two of the more vocal leaders. Throw Thomas Graham in there too. And those are three guys who are some of the most vocal leaders on your entire team. And you're going to lose Troy Dye to graduation, but you don't necessarily expect to lose Javon Holland and Thomas Graham, when the calendar flips over to 2020. And so for them to lose those two guys, those are important voices kind of in the back end of Oregon's defense, and they just weren't there. And so there's a lot of guys kind of being forced into new positions, forced into new leadership roles. And I think maybe now we're just kind of seeing those guys kind of take to it a little bit. But, in a normal season, we're at the halfway mark, right now. We're only 6-7 weeks in. And teams drastically change. Anybody who follows college football knows it's, a team can look one way in September and be playing a completely different way in November and into bowl season. And so I think we're just now kind of starting to see this team round into form a little bit. And it's in some ways it's kind of disappointing that we only get to see this team kind of play one more game, but I think that's just kind of the nature of this year. It's been weird for everybody, and some teams are peaking earlier than others. Some teams are peaking later than others. This is just kind of what you're getting when you throw in COVID and the cancellation of games and just not really having a full deck to kind of be playing with. You're going to see a lot of these types of things. And I think we saw an example of it in kind of its own special way with Oregon this season.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're exactly right. Because if you would have look at a team like Oklahoma, were 1-2, and if they hadn't won in triple overtime against Texas, they would have been 1-3. And
Right.
then you look at them now; they're 8-2. They won the Pac-12. They won the Big 12, and they're number 6 in the country. Some people believe that they're probably should be the number 4 team. So yeah, you're right. I mean, how a team looks so early in the season, and you even see our defense. The first 4 games, like you said, particularly the UCLA and Oregon State game, they just didn't look good. I mean, they were getting pushed around, they were getting run on. But then you look at Cal and then USC. I think the first 4 games we had 4 sacks. We had 16 tackles for loss. I don't know what her is, but the last 2 games we've had 7 sacks, 13 tackles for loss. And just in general, look physical. People are flying around, and I'm like, the defense that I've seen the last 2 weeks is the defense I expected. That's what the defense I thought we're going to see. And actually, the offense, I thought the first 4 games, 3.5. That's the second half of Oregon State. They didn't look very good. But the first 3.5 weeks, I was like, oh man. Joe Morton's done a miracle without even spring ball. Chuck throwing the ball all over the place, getting the ball down the field, the RPO, And then obviously the last I would say 2.5 games really started at halftime of the Oregon State game. The offenses looked probably, I don't know if I thought the offense was going to look the offensive has really has not been very consistent in the last couple of weeks. Now, granted, when you look at it, so Stanford's defense was dealing with some stuff because they had a lot of guys out with COVID. And then Washington State does not have a good defense. And UCLA has been a pretty inconsistent defense. And they even caused Oregon some trouble in that game. If you remember, they caused a lot of negative plays. And then Oregon State doesn't have a good defense either. And then when you go to Cal and USC, those are two of the best defenses in the Pac-12. So there is a little bit of that going on, meaning Justin Wilcox, no matter what talent he has out there, he can scheme a good defense together, and he can definitely cause disruption in the back end. And so there's a little bit of that you have to take into consideration. And maybe it is a regression, but remember the other team has players too, and that has coaches too. So they might have just run into some little better schemes that really took away some of the stuff that they were doing. And that maybe was just not shown in the first few games because those defenses just aren't as good. So I guess there's a little bit of that. You can always jump to being like, oh man, this offense is terrible now. You follow message boards, Twitter, and like bench Tyler Shuck, and I'm like, I mean, I don't know. I don't think why would you bench him? He won the job. He won a Pac-12 title in this season. And he hasn't looked great, but I mean, to jump to the immediate conclusion to bench him, I mean, come on. I just think that's a little hyperbolic. It's just my opinion. You just let's see how he plays. And I think it will be a good test. So let's talk about Iowa State. What do you watch? Have you seen a lot of Iowa State? What do you think about them?
Yeah, no, I've seen a little bit of Iowa State this season. I happened to watch a good portion of their first game of the season versus Louisiana. It was, oddly enough, was one of the few games that they lost this year and did not look very good. But look, I mean, Iowa State that is a really well coached team. You look at Matt Campbell and kind of what he has done there. It's no secret that he is one of the kind of the hotter names amongst the college coaching ranks right now, and for good reason. I mean, the way that he has kind of transformed that program over the last several years has been really, really impressive. And I don't think you can knock that. I don't think you can take that away from what Iowa State has done. I think you look at the talent comparison between the two teams. I think Oregon far kind of outmatches them there, but I mean, look, Iowa State has competed tooth and nail with the Oklahomas and the Texases and the Oklahoma States in that conference, really since Matt Campbell kind of came on board. And so I think any Oregon fan or any fan or, casual fan that takes a look at this Fiesta Bowl game and kind of expects Oregon to come in and dominate, I think that they've kind of got the wrong idea, because I think you really look at this team, you take a closer look at kind of the way that they play. They've got a really sound defense. Brock Purdy is, one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the country. Breece Hall, it might be one of the best running backs in the country. They've got some talent. They've got some guys who can play, and the Ducks are going to have their hands full. And you kind of alluded to it a little bit. I think defensively, we see Oregon kind of coming into its own a little bit. This will be an enormous challenge, kind of taking on Breece Hall and Brock Purdy and kind of Iowa State's offense and kind of some of the things that they can do offensively. But if I'm an Oregon fan and I'm looking at this team and coming into this game, the biggest question that I have is at quarterback. And we talked about a little bit with Tyler Shuck, and I know he has not played up to kind of a satisfactory standard here the last couple of weeks. I mean, the second half in the Cal game was by far his worst kind of stretch of play this season. And then, transitioning into the USC game, I thought, and I think a lot of people thought, he's got 2 weeks to kind of prepare and kind of like regroup a little bit. And he looked as bad as he's looked this entire season. And he's a first-year starter. He's going to have ups and downs. But I think when you get to this stage in the season with, kind of the stakes and what's on the line, you can't afford to have that. Or you saw how one-dimensional Oregon was, particularly in the second half of that game. And I think they only attempted a pass. I think Tyler Shuck only attempted 3 passes in the second half, and that doesn't come off to me as a coaching staff that is got a lot of confidence in Tyler Shuck. You look at his body language; didn't look like he had a lot of confidence in himself. This is a guy who has been touted as somebody who carries himself with a little bit more swagger and is a little bit more outspoken, kind of compared to Justin Herbert. Obviously, we know what kind of talent Justin Herbert was, but Tyler Shuck was more of kind of your, I guess, classic quarterback type in the way that he kind of rallies his teammates. And I know that he's well respected in that locker room, but he's playing worse football now than he was when he, started the season, was making his first starts, as a college quarterback, first starts on the road, kind of going through the growing pains that a young quarterback would go through. He has regressed. I don't think it's any secret. I don't think it's any small thing that Anthony Brown saw his very first action of the season against USC. And I know that, Oregon wanted to get more packages in for him and added a little bit of a different wrinkle in terms of some of their short yardage and their red zone formations. But there's a reason why he's playing in these games. If Tyler Shuck, I think, had the full confidence of the coaching staff, I think we would see him throughout the duration of these games. But I think it's legitimately waning at this point. And at the very end of the USC game, it was Anthony Brown out there who was kind of managing things. And I know that they wanted to keep things on the ground and run the ball. But even when, the few times Anthony Brown was having to make a pass, you saw just a little bit more confidence there and a little bit more competence, just in terms of his ability to kind of execute the offense. So, I'm personally of the opinion that they need to strongly consider, starting Anthony Brown in this game. And I know that Tyler Shuck's a young quarterback and he's going through some ups and downs right now, but the way that he looked at the end of the USC game and the way that Oregon's offense was so predictable at the end, you really got the feeling that if the game was another 5 minutes, if they had another 5 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter, and when things were kind of going downhill the way that they were, I don't think there's any guarantee that Oregon holds on and wins that game. I think their offense was becoming very, very predictable. And I think when you go into a game against a really well-coached team like Iowa State, against a defense like they have that has performed quite well this year, I think you're potentially you're asking to kind of have a repeat of the second half that we saw against USC for Tyler Shuck if he is in fact kind of your starter going into this game. I think they really need to strongly consider rolling with Anthony Brown to start the Fiesta Bowl.
You make an interesting point. My only kickback to that would be is Anthony Brown he's a fifth-year senior. Obviously, you don't lose eligibility. But is he a guy that maybe just decides to go to professional, whether it be try to make in the NFL or get on in the CFL or Arena League? So, or he's a guy that maybe because he didn't start and he doesn't know a situation, maybe he even tries to move on somewhere else to know a place where he can exactly go in and start. If you don't start Tyler Shuck, are you at that point almost kind of conceding that you don't know if he's that guy? And obviously you're dealing with the psyche of a young person that's 21 years old. And then there is a risk. And then at that point, going into next year, you're going to have, he doesn't know if he's for sure gets the job. He all of a sudden doesn't get the job. He then transfers out. And then you're dealing with probably, my assumption would be for some reason that it'd be Ty Thompson, who's one of the top-rated quarterbacks, 5-star by Rivals, top 50 guy, would probably be the guy that beats him out. That's my opinion, but it could be Jay Butterfield. But do you think it is worth? Because obviously you want to win the game. You would love to be back-to-back, not just Pac-12 champions, but New Year's 6 games, and you're pretty much the face of the Pac-12, and there's only 2 of you playing in bowls, and you're playing the big one. Is it more? I'm just throwing this out there. Would you rather say, I'm hanging with you. I know you haven't played your best, but you are our starting quarterback. I want you to continue to be our starting quarterback. I'm giving you the chance to say, hey, you know what? I've had my bumps in the road, but I'm going to let you go out there. And then obviously if all of a sudden first series throws an interception, then at that point you're going to have to say, hey, I want to win this game. I understand that. But if you go in there and he's not the starter, there's a trickle down effect. And remember, every move that you make can have effects in the future. Is it worth it? Because Anthony Brown might not be there anymore. There's a pretty good possibility.
Yeah, I don't think there's any guarantee that Anthony Brown will necessarily stick around for next season. I think these next few weeks will be pretty important just in terms of kind of determining some of these things kind of moving forward, obviously in terms of determining the starter for this game. But also just, in terms of who gets the opportunity. If Anthony Brown gets an opportunity to start this game and play and performs well, or, maybe similarly, maybe we see both Tyler Shuck and Anthony Brown in this game, and maybe they both perform at a similar level. And maybe that's enough of an impetus for him to stick around. At this point, I don't think you can necessarily be worried about the future, Tyler Shuck's future, because you've got an opportunity here to win, a second straight New Year's Six bowl game. You're coming off Pac-12 championship, which, by the way, Anthony Brown played a pretty integral role in pulling off that win. And so I think you have to entertain the idea of, for sure, adding even more to Anthony Brown's plate in this game. I think he showed you enough where he deserves that opportunity to play. But you also run the, you mentioned the fact, do you run, potentially, impacting the psyche of Tyler Shuck if he doesn't get, the start in this game? My only counter to that would be, do you ruin, does he potentially get his psyche even more kind of stepped on and kind of like beaten down if he goes out and we see kind of a repeat of the second half against USC, where he looks very uncomfortable going through his progressions, where he is very skittish in the pocket, where he doesn't really know where to go with the football. I mean, we saw one of the last series that he was in the game, he got pressured and was, deep in Oregon's own territory. And, he's thrown off his back foot and nearly threw an interception. It does not look like a player who is composed right now. And I don't know if it's, obviously you got to play to kind of regain some of that confidence, but this has been a slow but sure kind of decline for Tyler Shuck over the past several weeks. And there hasn't been anything that would demonstrate or signal to anybody that this is turning around, at least anytime soon. And so, I think Mario Cristobal is somebody who has always, he's kind of based things more or less on a meritocracy. I know that Tyler Shuck, again, he's a well-respected player. He seems like a really good teammate and a really good kid. I don't think anybody, is rooting against him or anything like that. I think everyone wants to see him succeed. But if you're not getting the job done, you're just not getting the job done. And you've got a guy in Anthony Brown who's seasoned. He's, in the limited action that he has played this season, I think he has shown you that he's capable. He seems to be a composed player. And I think that can provide a little bit of a spark for an offense that, quite frankly, needs a spark right now. I mean, they have gone into the tank, especially the last two games that they've had. They just don't look like they've got a lot of life right now and a lot of punch. Travis Dye is doing his thing. We saw Sean Dollars emerge a little bit, but the receivers they've been a non-factor. They really have been a non-factor these last few weeks. And I think a lot of it has to do with the play of the quarterback, and you got to make a change. I really do feel like there has to be a change here in terms of at least the number of reps that Tyler Shuck is getting in practice and kind of what we see from him in games. Maybe it is kind of a dual partnership there during the Fiesta Bowl. But I think you have to incorporate, at the very least, Anthony Brown a little bit more into the game plan.
So you think if, from what you've seen, there's enough hesitation that if Tyler Shuck goes out there, we definitely would not, unless he drastically has a deep dive into reinvention over the next couple weeks. You don't think you'd see a guy that probably would come out there and be able to win the game versus Iowa State?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of confidence, and that's just me, sitting here observing, what we see on game days. Obviously I'm not there during practice, and it's easy to say, it's easy to call for, the easiest thing to do is call for a backup when the starter isn't playing well. But I just think that the way that we have seen kind of Tyler Shuck regress, and the way that his confidence level has really kind of dipped here in the last few weeks, it's all the earmarkings of a player who needs to kind of take a step back. And he just, to me, he seems like he's kind of cooked mentally. And I don't think it's necessarily a thing where he can't come back from it. I do think he's got the physical talent. I think he's got the tools to be a really, really quality starting quarterback in the Pac-12. But I think right now it's the stuff between the ears that is kind of getting in his way and is kind of serving as some of these obstacles for him. And I think that, maybe it is an opportunity for him to kind of, all right, let's take a step back. Let's see what this other guy can do. Let's try to get, everything as far as what Tyler Shuck needs to work on. Let's try to get that addressed and squared away in practice and see if we see more improvement there. And if some of the issues continue, then you roll with Anthony Brown. If we see marked improvement over these next couple of weeks leading up to the Fiesta Bowl, then you go with Tyler Shuck. I think you gotta keep an open mind at that position right now if you're Oregon, because you're just not getting enough out of the quarterback position to be a viable long-term threat, and at least a viable threat, in my opinion, against a team like Iowa State, they've got the quarterback. They've got kind of these components in place for us. So this is a team that will take advantage of you if you are not kind of on top of your game coming into this game. This is the biggest game in program history for Iowa State.
Yeah.
So they're going to be geared up for this game, and I think you need to
match it.
You need to be able to match it and make some tough decisions if you're Mario Cristobal, and that might involve benching Tyler Shuck.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm probably going to go a little bit off on a red herring here, but I all of a sudden was thinking, because I was thinking about how Tyler Shuck, I'm like, man, the first couple of weeks I was seeing how he was playing. He looked comfortable and he was a playmaker. I mean, the Washington State game, the RPO probably had 70 plus yards running, and I think he had similar to that even against Stanford and UCLA. He played perfectly fine. It was offensive line at times that had a problem with the twisting and stunting by the UCLA defense. And then it was started with the Oregon State game. But then I kind of went back and I thought of Herbert. And I thought of Herbert his junior year. And do you remember when he went out? He obviously was playing well early. And then he went out in that Washington State game, had a stinker, and then Arizona was not a good game. And even the rest of that year, he kind of regressed. And even like last year, Herbert, like he had the poor game against Arizona State. And then actually the next week, he probably even had a worse game against Oregon State. They just were able to win it. I don't know. And I love Mario Cristobal. But the one common denominator, because obviously Joe Moorhead is the offensive coordinator now, and then before that it was Marcus Arroyo, and a lot of people like to blame Arroyo. And I do think certain play calls, I in the way he used Herbert. But is there something about there is some things, and I love Mario, but you probably, I don't know if you ever heard my podcast. You might have went back and listened. But last week, I for the longest time, I do most of the time, I don't have guests, and I just go on with myself, and I would go off into my monologues. And I was like, if I were Auburn, because at that point you're hearing some smoke about it, is Auburn going to hire Mario Cristobal? Is he the head candidate? You'd go on their message boards if people really wanted Mario. And I actually made the argument on my podcast. I also made the argument on a different podcast for actually a SEC podcast. I said, I don't think you want Mario. And one of my arguments is there kind of a like how do I phrase this? Does Mario kind of pressure it into this? He really pushes the culture, and I think it's a good part of everything he does. But does he have kind of this ball of, because he's pretty conservative in his nature? You even see how he plans the games. Does he have this kind of pressure on the quarterback, like, don't put us in a position we can't lose turnover battles? Is there this kind of, well, I'm not in the building with Mario Cristobal, but how I could see even how he seems to be in his nature is, you're the quarterback, you can't make mistakes, you're not bigger than the team, you have to play within the team, and could all of a sudden win a guy like Herbert did, or in the place of Show, they all of a sudden make a couple mistakes, and all of a sudden that pressure, that psyche, it starts getting to their psyche, and they're like, oh man, I'm being an obstacle to the team's success. I'm doing the one thing I'm not, and that's making mistakes and putting us in bad positions. And could you all of a sudden be seeing this kind of trickle down effect? And this is an assumption on me, but it did happen with Herbert as a junior. It did happen with Herbert as a senior. And now it's all of a sudden happening to Tyler Shuck. And I saw Herbert, and you see till this day what a freaking talent that guy is. And you even saw in college at times when he let it go, how good he was. And then I saw Tyler Shuck the first 3 weeks making plays with his legs, dropping dimes down the field to Devin Williams, Johnny Johnson. And then all of a sudden, this guy looks like he can't play quarterback, kind of to a certain extent, to be honest with you, like you said.
Yeah.
Is it something that Mario Cristobal is doing that gets in the psyche of his quarterbacks that's causing this? Is that too far-fetched where I'm going?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Mario has he has his style of coaching and kind of his expectations, and they are extremely high. I don't think it's really too dissimilar though from a lot of coaches kind of at that level. I think with Herbert, I think these are two different situations the way I look at it. I think with the Herbert situation last year, I think Oregon was reluctant to kind of let him go. And we didn't really see it until kind of the end of the season when he started to run the ball a lot more. He's a lot more athletic than I think a lot of people give him credit for. Excuse me. But I think we saw last year, though, they didn't want to risk getting Herbert injured and risk an opportunity to win a Pac-12 championship and risk an opportunity to play for a Rose Bowl. So I think you saw some more kind of conservative play calling that kept Justin Herbert out of harm's way. I also think that Marcus Arroyo is decidedly average as a play caller.
I agree with that. We agree on that.
Yeah. So I think that that didn't really do Justin Herbert any favors. And let's look at it. This fact too is the fact that Justin Herbert, he did not have the luxury of playing in an offense that was, filled with playmakers, like Marcus Mariota did, or Dennis Dixon, some of these, former Oregon greats at quarterback who really had a lot of advantages with some of the talent that was surrounding them. Justin Herbert never had that. The closest thing that he ever had, closest he was ever to that was when he was a freshman. He had guys like Darren Carrington and the like that, were Pharaoh Brown, I believe, Royce Freeman. Like, those are some guys that, are playing in the NFL or had chances to play in the NFL. He really did not have that, later in his career. And I think Oregon is still trying to kind of get back to that point. We talk about recruiting classes, but I think they are getting closer to that, especially with the recruiting class that they just signed. I think Tyler Shuck is kind of the beneficiary in some ways of having a guy like Joe Moorhead in, and I know that it hasn't been a normal offseason, but there's been opportunities for him to kind of make plays in this offense, and you've seen the potential that this offense has, the explosive potential that this offense has, kind of compared to what, Herbert was dealing with. And yeah, Mario might be a little bit demanding, but I think this is, you don't hire Joe Moorhead, at least in my opinion, you don't hire Joe Moorhead so Mario Cristobal can kind of stand in the way of whatever is going on in the offense. I think Mario Cristobal certainly has his hand on the off, as far as what goes on with the offensive line. And I'm sure he has some input on the offensive game plan.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, this is Joe Moorhead's baby. And I think that, what we saw out of Tyler Shuck at the beginning of the season was encouraging, and it kind of spoke to kind of the talent that he has. And I think he showed a lot more talent than a lot of people were expecting of him, especially athletically. I don't know if anybody expected him to be as much of a threat running the football as he was. I think this is a confidence thing with him. I never saw Justin Herbert necessarily lose confidence in his ability. He might have not have been put in the best positions to kind of have these kind of explosive games offensively. But, I think if you were to stick Justin Herbert in this offense, I think, in Joe Moorhead's offense, I think you would see a much more dynamic player than we saw last year out of Herbert. Shuck has been given these opportunities and he has performed well at times, but you were seeing this steady decline that I think is very concerning. And it to me, it speaks to kind of his confidence level right now and where it's at. I think he's making mistakes that, he shouldn't be making kind of continually. I mean, especially when you look at his throws over the middle of the field. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but his percentages go down drastically and the frequency of turnovers goes up dramatically. And so these are things that I think these are Tyler Shuck specific things. I don't think it's necessarily anything you can attribute to Mario Cristobal meddling with the offense or putting too much pressure on his quarterbacks. I think Mario Cristobal knows that he's got a good offensive coordinator in Joe Moorhead, and it's wise to let Joe Moorhead do his thing. But you're just not seeing kind of Tyler Shuck hold up the end. And I know that he's trying, and I don't think anyone says that, would ever say that he's not giving it his best effort. I think it's just when you see some of these mistakes occur, you see this kind of snowball effect, and it's kind of been slowly but surely snowballing for Tyler Shuck. I mean, you just look at his outings, from game one to, through the Pac-12 championship game. It's been a pretty steady regression that we have seen. So, so I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I'm very curious. I thought going into the USC game, honestly, I thought that it was a make or break game for Tyler Shuck, just in terms of kind of getting some of the detractors off his back, because they came out in full force, I think, after that Cal game. And he just didn't do much to kind of dissuade anybody from that position. So.
Yeah, and I don't know if I don't take their word for everything, but Pro Football Focus, I think, does a pretty good job on grading a player, and I believe he's at number 11th graded quarterback in the Pac-12. So that kind of is a testament of how he's just not really playing very good. And I know statistically, I think he's second in passing. He has the highest passer rating. But yeah, like you said, he probably has the best offensive coordinator in the conference, along with playing with some of the best offensive talent in the conference. So, I mean, that could also add to better statistics than really what his play has been. So, yeah. So if you were to say, I mean, this is kind of projecting the future. If you had to put a gun to your proverbial head, do you think he'll be the quarterback in 2021? Do you think he'll get this turned around? Do you have faith in it, or is it one of those situations where? Because remember, Ty Thompson. I don't know. I don't know if you're out there in Arizona. I don't know if you hit up any of his games, but I saw him play. They do those live streams. I think I saw him play pretty much every game, and that kid's good. He's one of the best. Yeah, I saw him play at the Elite 11. He was the best quarterback there. He's big. He's fast. He's athletic. He's really competitive. And I would not want to be a quarterback that doesn't fit, because that kid could come in, he could start. And with the talent that Oregon's bringing in, I think he could probably be pretty successful even as a freshman quarterback. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think, it's, again, this bowl game will be pretty telling, I think, as far as what we see. If I had to make a prediction, I I would say that, going into 2021, I think you're going to see an open quarterback competition, and I think it's likely that it's probably between Tyler Shuck, Jay Butterfield, Ty Thompson, and maybe Anthony Brown, depending on what his decision is after the season comes to an end. I think that you see an open quarterback competition, and maybe it's one of those things where Tyler Shuck just needs an off season. He just needs to get to the off season, needs to kind of hit the reset button a little bit, needs to not be necessarily dealing with COVID to the degree that he was dealing with COVID. I think the team in general. I think there's a lot of guys on that team who are probably really struggling with COVID right now, and I think that we can't underestimate that impact too. I think these last several months I think have had a really kind of dramatic impact on a lot of different people in different ways. And so, I think I wouldn't discount the fact that this has been a really trying year mentally for Tyler Shuck. So, I think it's possible that maybe he just needs an off season kind of to get everything kind of reset and, going in with kind of a fresh mind, fresh eyes, and kind of attacking this thing next year. And look, I think, like I've said before, I think he's got the talent. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that he can play at a very high level in the Pac-12. I think he just needs to overcome kind of whatever he is battling, whether it's a lack of confidence or maybe he's just just maybe not seeing the field right, or kind of understanding the offense the way that he needs to understand it. Maybe that's he just needs some of that time to kind of get to that point. We see guys kind of progress and develop. So I wouldn't say you got to stick a fork in Tyler Shuck, but I think as it stands right now, I think you have to give. You brought in Anthony Brown for a reason, unless we're not seeing something in practice where he is head and shoulders below where Tyler Shuck is in a practice setting, then I think you have to bring him on, and you have to give him a chance to play. And maybe you bring in Tyler Shuck to save the day if Anthony Brown gets to start and kind of falters against Iowa State. Maybe you bring in Tyler Shuck and give him an opportunity to win it. He's gonna have to prove it on the field, and that that's kind of what it boils down to. Whether it's a practice field or in a game setting, he's gonna have to prove it. And I think right now, he's just not getting it done. And it's fixable. But I think that you have to go with somebody who's in a little bit better of a place, kind of mentally, heading into this game and kind of moving forward too. If Anthony Brown really shows out, and he decides wants to come back to Oregon next year, I know Ty Thompson has been getting a lot of hype, and I'm right there with you. I think he's got all the tools to be a great at Oregon when he gets his opportunity. I think Jay he's got similar talent as well. But I think Anthony Brown is somebody that has some experience, has kind of been there, done that. And you got to kind of see what you got in him. And I think depending on how he plays, I could see there being a pretty open quarterback competition going into 2021. I don't think it's Tyler Shuck's job. I don't think it's anyone's job, regardless of what we see in the Fiesta Bowl. Unless Tyler Shuck, has a career day and throws for over 400 yards and is just looking, sharp as a razor. I don't think that. I don't think we're going to have any sort of solution as far as what Oregon's quarterback situation is like heading into next season.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Once again, I'm interested. I'm liking the trajectory. So a couple different points. So you I know mostly docs, but do you watch most of the Pac-12? What was your overall thoughts of the conference? Who impressed you? Who didn't impress you? And who? Obviously, most of the teams other than Oregon and Colorado. Colorado plays Texas in the Alamo Bowl. Who are you looking at in the future as being a team that can be a contender in the Pac-12 and can be up there at the top?
Yeah. Well, you kind of touched on some of them. I think, Colorado showed a lot this season. Obviously USC had a good year. But, two programs that I think, really that people kind of that are paying attention to the Pac-12 And I say that because I know the Pac-12 hasn't really done a whole lot on the field to kind of generate that buzz and some of that notoriety. But I think two programs that I'm going to be very, very curious to kind of monitor here over the next year are UCLA and Arizona State. I think Arizona State just didn't really get the opportunity to kind of show out and play, kind of, due to COVID, to a lot of the expectations that were had, like that a lot of people had of them heading into the season. I think Jaden Daniels is a tremendous quarterback. You see some of the skill talent that they have. You see kind of what they've been doing in terms of recruiting on both sides of the ball. I think defensively, they've got some really intriguing players there. I'm very interested to see kind of what Arizona State does over the course of the next year. Again, they didn't get their opportunity necessarily to really show what they are capable of this season, but I think that's a team that you really got to keep a close eye on. UCLA, I know that Chip has kind of run into some resistance there. I know that there was some unfounded rumors that he was, perhaps going to be replaced as the head coach. I think that would be the wrong move right now if you're UCLA. I think he is just kind of starting to kind of get his foothold in LA and really instill his culture there. The improvement that team made from last year to this year, I think is substantial. They probably should have beat USC. You can make a great argument that they should have beat Oregon. They've got some players there. They've got a scheme there that I think is adaptable to the talent that they're bringing in, that I expect them to be a team that is at the very least a tough out in the Pac-12 South here over the next couple of seasons. I think USC, that's going to be a really interesting situation to kind of keep an eye on as well. I mean, with Keaton Slovis, as long as he's there, I think USC is going to be competitive, but they're going to be losing Amon-Ra St. Brown. They're going to be losing Tyler Vaughns. Drake London is a great talent, and that they're going to find receivers. But they haven't really got it done in terms of addressing needs along the offensive line. I think defensively they have some players there. Obviously, Talanoa Hufanga is a sublime talent, and I think he's going to be somebody that we see playing on Sundays here real soon. But I think that's defensively, that is an area I kind of worry about a little bit with USC. They just don't have the caliber of players. They haven't been recruiting the caliber of players that we were used to seeing on that side of the ball at USC. So that's a team that I'm kind of interested to see as well. Washington, looking at the North, I think Washington is going to be interesting. They haven't really had the success, at least this past cycle, recruiting that I think a lot of people thought that Jimmy Lake was going to have. But they have been traditionally strong on defense. Maybe they get some momentum going on offense with some of the guys that they have there. I really like Puka Nacua. I actually really like some of the running backs that they had this year. So we'll see if they can kind of keep the ball moving there. Stanford is always going to be a kind of a tough team to play. As long as David Shaw is there, they're going to be a competitive team. Oregon State, I don't know how they do it as far as being competitive week in and week out. They're going to lose Jamar Jefferson, and that's going to be a huge loss for them. But Jonathan Smith has done, I think, a really good job there, kind of piecemealing together a team that is competitive each and every week, that can do some things on offense, that has shown some things on defense. They're not, consistent enough, I think, to kind of break through. But I think they're a team to continue to keep an eye on, because I think that Jonathan Smith gets it as far as like how to recruit to Corvallis and how to manage, some of the expectations there. And I don't think anybody necessarily thinks that Oregon State is going to be a perennial Pac-12 North contender, but I think that he's going to have them, better equipped to kind of be in those games here, over the next few seasons. I think he really is probably the best fit Oregon State could have kind of hoped for in a head coach. So that's a team that I'm really kind of interested in looking at too. I think Oregon State is I don't think a lot of people are saying that, but I think that they're a team that you really do need to kind of keep an eye on, because I think they are at least moving in a positive direction there.
Yeah. Oh man, you offer some good thoughts. I would probably the issue right now with the Pac-12. So there's a lot of different narratives out there. A lot of blame at Larry Scott. People love to say that, and he's not been a good commissioner. And obviously they have not been involved in the college football playoff. I think it's 4 years now since Washington last made it. But at the end of the day, when you just look at the roster talent, they're just not on the level of some of the other conferences. And it's really the top tier. Obviously, it's not just that SEC is great. SEC is great. SEC has a lot of not great teams, but you have Alabama, you have LSU, you have Florida, you have Georgia, and then you had Oklahoma in the Big 12, and you have Clemson in the ACC, and of course Notre Dame over in the ACC this year. That's what's been hurting them is the Pac-12 is the team that did get the talent was USC. But the problem was USC, I just don't think they're a well-coached team. I don't think Clay Helton's a great coach. I don't think they just aren't. I mean, they have not played. This is a team that in the 247 team talent composite that had a top 5 roster every year until this year. This year they were 10, which is still great. And so I just think there was a lack of talent for the other teams, and then the one team that did have that talent that could compete at a higher level just was not a well-coached team. The problem with a lot of these other teams, and I think there is some great coaches. I think Jonathan Smith is a terrific coach. I think Kyle Whittingham is one of the best coaches of college football, and his ability to use his talent to develop his talent. You give Kyle Whittingham a couple of years with you, and you can have a year like they had last year, which if they beat Oregon, they were going to be in the college football playoff. You have a great coach in David Shaw, who's obviously won several Pac-12 North titles and been Pac-12 titles. But the issue is talent. The only team now that I think has that will have the talent in place, and I will have the coaches in place. You have Joe Moorhead, you have Andy Avalos. It really is Oregon. And you can say I'm a fan. Sure, yes, I am a fan, but I also would be very realistic. If they're not good enough, Oregon will be that Pac-12 needs Oregon to play up to what they're going to have on the roster. They are going to have a roster that can compete for a college football playoff. They are going to have the players that can not only win the Pac-12, but that could possibly go to the college football playoff and that can compete in a reasonable way. I mean, it's tough to say that they're going to beat Alabama. It's tough to say they're going to beat Ohio State and Clemson because these guys have double-digit 5 stars in their roster. And I think this year was 30-plus top 100 players in their roster. But if the Pac-12, I think for it to become relevant on the national stage, you have to be a fan of Oregon right now. If you're a Pac-12 fan, you really do have to be a fan of Oregon because the rest of the teams just won't have the talent. And I think when I look at the Pac-12, I'm just like, Oregon, you have what's in place. You've won back-to-back Pac-12. You can win not only the Pac-12 every single year, but you need to win every single game. And we need you to be what your talent's going to be. And we need the Oregon Ducks to be the standard bearer for the Pac-12 so that the people that love bagging on the Pac-12, like laughing at the Pac-12 and like taking shots at the Pac-12. And I was not a West Coast guy. I became a Duck fan when I lived on the West Coast, lived out in Los Angeles, but I'm actually in the Midwest. But I grew up with the Big Ten and the Pac-12 playing for the Rose Bowl. I grew up during the Pete Carroll years and USC being one of the best teams. So to see the Pac-12 where it's been the last couple of years and not be relevant and hearing all the media members, whether it be Paul Feinbaum on the ESPN or The Athletic, Stewie Mandel and Bruce Feldman and Athlon Sports and all the other mediums that cover constantly like, Pac-12. Pac-12 this, Pac-12 that, and obviously they got crap for starting the latest due to COVID, which I thought was unfair. I mean, right. How you can predict how that was going to be. But if you're a Pac-12 fan, if you want them to get back to national relevance, I'm sorry, you have to root for Oregon because the other teams aren't going to have the talent.
Right.
Washington's not going to have the talent. Stanford doesn't have the talent. USC probably has the talent, but are you really going to trust what they have been? I mean, they have to have a coaching change to even remotely, like, they just don't have the culture there. I mean, they should have dominated the Pac-12 the last 5-6 years. They should have won every single year. And they've won 0 Pac-12 titles. I mean, I think they won one like 3 years ago, but it's Oregon. Oregon is the team that could be the standard bearer of the Pac-12. And I guess as an Oregon fan, you want it to be that way. But even if you're just a fan of the Pac-12, and actually I was listening to, I think it's Haberman and Minkoff. I might be saying the names wrong. They're an NFL podcast. They actually said that today. They're like, they're talking. I think they're on the West Coast, but they were like referencing. They went off into some subjects to obviously talking about the NFL, and then they went off. And they're like, "So what do you think about the Pac-12?" And the other one guy said, he's like, I saw a lot of people were mad that USC had to play in the Pac-12 title game. That USC was not just crowned the Pac-12. He's like, they should be happy that they had to play Oregon and that Oregon beat them, because at the end of the day, Oregon is the only team that really will go out there and be physical and has the ability to play with other teams. He's like, if I were the Pac-12 and I would want someone to go out and play Alabama or Ohio State, it would be Oregon, because you know that they're going to at least go out there and they're going to hit you in the mouth. He's like, USC, I'm not going to say, he's like, they're soft as, and I'm like, that's true. I mean, you don't want USC winning right now. They would go and embarrass themselves against Iowa State. Honestly, think so. And so, sorry to go off in kind of a long spiel there, but I'm an Oregon fan, and you're an Oregon fan, so it might come across as biased. But to just put it frankly, the Pac-12 needs Oregon to be good.
Yeah, they need, I think the Pac-12 needs Oregon to be good. They need, quite honestly, they need USC to be good too. And there needs to be probably a change eventually at the top there, as far as, the next coach that they bring in, and somebody who really understands the importance of, I think all college coaches understand the importance of recruiting, but kind of backs it up on the recruiting trail. I mean, you're not going to find a more dogged recruiter than Mario Cristobal anywhere in the country. But for Mario Cristobal to come into Southern California and just be taking players out of USC's backyard year after year, and coupling that with a really strong presence nationally on the recruiting scene, that's tough to contend with. And I think USC, if you're looking for kind of another team to emerge, that other team probably has to be USC. They have to have a coach that comes in there and, doesn't let the Mario Cristobals of the world and frankly other coaches from outside the Pac-12 footprint come in and raid California. I mean, USC should be attracting the best players in the state of California year after year. Really the best players on the West Coast. I mean, they should be at that level. And right now, Oregon is the school that is attracting that talent. Oregon is the one that is capitalizing on all that talent with what they do on the field. And they're kind of leaving USC a little bit in the dust. I mean, the fact that USC finished dead last in the Pac-12 in recruiting, not this, not the 2021 recruiting cycle, but the 2020 recruiting cycle, that should never, ever, 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 ever happen. And so when you see things like that occurring at USC, it feels like it's just a matter of time. And I've said this elsewhere, but Clay Helton has gotten really, really good at being a survivalist and holding on to his job. And I think look, like he's done just enough on the field to kind of at least stay in the good graces of the individuals who are making decisions in LA for the Trojans. But I think that time is probably nearing its end. If we're all being honest, it's probably gone on a lot longer than a lot of people expected. But I think that time is kind of nearing its end, and then the question becomes, what does USC do next in terms of who they hire? Is one of those things that they can pull Urban Meyer out of retirement and get him to kind of come in? I think that would be something that really, really shakes up the Pac-12. If you've got a guy like Urban Meyer who comes into that program, who has the recruiting chops that he has, who certainly has the kind of the rings and the hardware to back up the reputation that he has, then I think you're seeing, you should be prepared to see a little bit different team at it, from USC.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you should be prepared to see a different team or a different kind of caliber of play coming out of the Pac-12, because then you got Oregon, you've got USC. I'm not saying they have to hire Urban Meyer, but I'm just saying somebody of that caliber or just below, who understands the importance of Southern California and really it dedicates themselves to, keeping the best talent in Southern California and on the West Coast, and in that Pac-12 footprint. I think that's what you're gonna need to see if you want to see the Pac-12 kind of emerge as a relevant conference once again.
So you would say that for Pac-12, it wouldn't just need Oregon; it'd possibly need both.
I think I really do think that they need both, and it probably comes at the detriment of Oregon. I mean, they need at least one of those programs, but I think probably having at least two programs there, it gets people focused in a little bit more on what's going on with the Pac-12. And look, we've seen what Clemson has done in the ACC. I mean, they essentially run that conference, and they have a pretty clear path to the playoff each and every year. This year, they made it to the playoff, but it was a little bit different with Notre Dame playing, all ACC games. But you look across the country, and the best conferences that or the conferences that have kind of the most cachet when it comes to the college football playoff, it is the SEC, it is the Big Ten, it is the Big 12. The ACC has had, they've been pretty deep here in recent years as well. So it's the Pac-12 that is kind of lacking that right now. And I think you need to start to see kind of some of that depth reveal itself in the conference, because the Pac-12, traditionally it has been a pretty deep conference, and it's been a conference that's had a lot of really strong teams, and probably has been overlooked nationally more than they should have been. But in recent seasons, it hasn't been there. The Cals of the world, the Stanfords of the world, the Washingtons of the world, they haven't really been kind of those strong programs. They haven't been performing on the field the way that you would expect. You look at Washington, they, before kind of Oregon emerged here, at least over the last couple of seasons, they were probably the standard bearer in the conference. But even then, it's, they made one college football playoff appearance, and, were beat fairly soundly by Alabama, and just haven't really heard from them since then. And, they haven't won on the big stage in terms of like a big bowl game or anything like that. So it's hard for people to be, continually buying into Washington when you see them rise up, and then, just as quickly as they come, they go. And so having a program that is kind of remains at the top, and is, again, Oregon has been doing it recently, but I think, you need to see a USC emerge if you want to see the Pac-12 kind of, again, regain some of the relevancy that I think it used to have. You're going to need to see, more than just one team kind of dominate in this conference. You need to see a few other teams kind of emerge and be players kind of on the national stage.
I see what you're saying. For I guess for the conference, when I'm looking at it, I guess the only reason really kickback I'd have is like even so I see what you're saying for the conference, and I actually would agree from your argument that you're making. I guess if I'm looking at it because obviously the ACC is really not any good except for Clemson. And actually, that was not Clemson's conference. That was Florida State's for right. I don't know how long. And then all of a sudden Clemson comes along and just takes over. Big 12 is obviously Oklahoma's conference. I think they won their 6th straight title. I believe Ohio State won their fourth, technically right now none of those schools have an adversary. So that's where, when I was kind of looking at it from that, I guess, prison in like Oregon becomes Oklahoma, Clemson, and Ohio State. But
it's got to start somewhere, yeah.
But when you nick the Pac-12, I guess for you to say, oh, the Pac-12 solid in a sense, like in particular, I guess we could start off with just let's have one really good team. But if you want to look at it more as an adversary with a good conference as a whole, yeah, then you would probably need a good USC, because what makes the SEC so good is you don't just have Bama. You had LSU do what they did. You had Georgia made the national title a few years ago. I mean, Florida has had teams that are good enough, and even probably good enough this year. It's what makes it so good is there really is about five. I mean, Texas A&M almost stuck in the playoffs this year, so you really have 5-6 teams that are honestly really pretty good. Whereas most of the other conferences, honestly, when I'm just thinking about it right now, is there really a good conference but the SEC?
Yeah.
Take Clemson out of the ACC. Take Oklahoma out of the Big 12. Take Ohio State of the Big 10. Are those conferences?
Right. Yeah, and I think you're seeing kind of a consolidation of a lot of talent in some of these programs. You look at Clemson, you look at Ohio State, look at Georgia, Alabama, LSU. These are all teams that are among the top teams in the recruiting rankings year after year, and I think we're seeing that being. I mean, it's been repeated over time for a while, but I think we're seeing even more kind of like more emphasis on some of these programs, really like kind of cornering the market on some of the premier talent in the country. It's and they're doing a really good job with retaining that talent and developing it. And so I think it's I don't think there's anything significant in terms of a landscape change occurring in college football right now. I do think that there is like a cyclical element to it taking place, and we're just kind of SEC is always going to be strong. I don't think anyone's going to argue that. But in terms of what you're seeing from the other conferences, then those other conferences have traditionally been up and down. There's been seasons when the Big Ten has been super deep, and you've got Michigan and Ohio State, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Penn State. You've got these teams that are really showing out. You've got the Big 12, Oklahoma State. It wasn't that long ago Oklahoma State was putting up numbers and challenging for BCS games and things like that. Texas has been they've been kind of the USC of the Big 12, if you want to make that comparison. But that's a team that's always got talent. You're seeing what Iowa State's doing. You've seen what Kansas State has done. So look, I think some of this is a little bit cyclical. I think right now the Pac-12 just has not been kind of performing up to snuff. And I think it really, if you want to trace it back anywhere, it goes back to kind of recruiting. And I think what you're seeing is Mario Cristobal at Oregon, and a reason why Oregon is kind of emerging as this power, and they've been a power for a while, but really even more so than they have kind of traditionally, is the fact that they're getting it done on the recruiting trail. They are out recruiting everybody within the Pac-12 footprint right now, and there's no one that is even really close to them on a consistent basis. USC maybe is the closest team, but even then, it's like I mentioned, when you have Mario Cristobal being able to go into schools like Mater Dei, and some of those schools like St. John Bosco, and taking some of the best talent that those schools produce, which are these are national prospects, with offers from all over the country. When you see a guy like that from Oregon, from Eugene, Oregon, taking some of your best players, that's a big deal. And that doesn't happen very often. It has rarely happened in the history of the Pac-12. So there needs to be kind of that a little bit of an awakening, at least as in terms of an approach to recruiting, that starts to kind of shift the conversation to one where it isn't so much predicated on what the Pac-12 isn't doing, but it's more predicated on look at all the changes, and look at the different approach that these schools are taking kind of the recruiting process, because at this point Oregon is kind of running away with that title, and until somebody kind of puts their foot down, and again it probably has to be USC, I don't really see that slowing down anytime soon, especially when you have somebody who is tireless as Mario Cristobal is, at the helm at Oregon with the Nike influence and kind of the marketing power that the university has. You're going to continue seeing Oregon kind of at the top of that, top of those rankings for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, we're probably going to wrap up, and we could ask you one quick question. What did you think about the extension for Mario Cristobal? And were you happy, excited? Did you agree with it? Are you still waiting to see? What's your thoughts on the extension?
Yeah, no, I think it was a long time coming, honestly. I know that there was a lot of reports that they had something worked out. They were on the verge of announcing something kind of pre-COVID, and then with COVID kind of taking the attention off sports and just really commanding everybody's attention just in terms of day-to-day life. I think that the university realized probably wasn't the right time to be announcing a new lucrative deal for the football coach, and so I think things got put on back burner a little bit. I think some people, within the fan base were a little bit restless and kind of wondering, when is this going to happen? Really like to get something done because they don't want to see Mario Cristobal go. So I think the fact that it got done I think was a comforting thing for a lot of Duck fans. I think it was the right move. I think that, honestly, I was expecting them to kind of have a little bit bigger of a contract than they had. But I think it sounds like, look, like Mario Cristobal seems to be very, very happy in Eugene. I think he understands what he has at Oregon. He's being paid, I think, commensurate with what he has proven thus far. And I think, if you see Oregon continue to perform at a high level, the kind of level that I think a lot of people are expecting of them based on some of what we've talked about in terms of recruiting, you're probably going to see that deal get renegotiated, and I think you would see him, be even earning even more money kind of annually than what he's already making. So I think it was a solid deal. I think I don't think Mario Cristobal really had any ever serious intention of leaving Oregon for Auburn or another job. If anything, I think his agent is a smart agent and was using that as kind of leverage to get a deal done with Oregon as soon as possible. I think they did that, and I think if you're an Oregon fan, I think you have to be very, very pleased with what the university is kind of parting ways with financially. I don't think again, none of this is a lot of this I think is being funded by private donations in terms of what Mario Cristobal's salary is. So it's not that much of a strain on the university as far as what I can gather. But this is a pretty friendly deal for the university, and I think it's a pretty solid deal if you're Mario Cristobal when you look at the grand scheme of things and what you've accomplished so far. I think that you understand that you've got a pretty great thing going at Oregon, and there's going to be opportunities to make even more money at Oregon should he continue backing it up on the field.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, just to comment on that, I agree. There was, a lot of scuttlebutt and that, Auburn is open and he's going to leave. And I was watching Auburn born like, oh, we can pay him more. And all I'm thinking is you're not the best job in your state. You have to play Alabama, LSU, and Georgia every single year. And if you lose to them, you're going to get fired in a couple years. Gene Chizik got fired 2 years after he won the national title. Tommy Tuberville was 13-0, had the number 3 team in the country, was fired 2 years later. Gus Malzahn was 3-5. He led them to the national title game 5 years ago. He had them in the top 5 here like 3 years ago. He got fired. I'm like, that just does not sound appealing. Right. He can be at Oregon, where basically his only other real competition on a consistent basis to be the top program is USC, and he can make good money, and if he has a couple bad years or has years maybe that he doesn't, even like this year, maybe he's not in the college football playoff or not in the top 10. He's not having to worry about being on the hot seat. You just think about it from all those different aspects. Like, I don't care if they can offer you an upfront $8 million a year for, $32 million contract for 4 years. You're going to get fired in 2 years if you don't live up to expectations. I was like, that does not seem like an appealing job to me. And quickly, you saw the movement up with his contract, and that's kind of what I was thinking. It was just funny to see some of the narratives online, like, oh, but Auburn's in the SEC and they can pay him more. I'm like, yeah, he could go over there and get fired within a year or two. Who knows? Right. It just doesn't sound very something about that does not sound appealing at all. And you've seen, I don't know if you follow the Auburn, Billy Napier turned it down. He stayed at Louisiana. Bill Clark turned it down. He stayed at Alabama, Birmingham. Steve Sarkisian turned it down. He'd rather be the offensive coordinator under Nick Saban. I'm like, the job's really not that appealing. You just got to look at something more than just it's in the SEC. So, that was just a quick comment on that one. Yeah. Well, man, so I guess before we go, because I don't know if we're going to talk probably again before the Fiesta Bowl, who do you got? Who do you got in the Fiesta Bowl, Iowa State? Maybe I'll ask you. So who do you got to win the national title? Then we'll go ahead to Fiesta Bowl. Who do you have? Yeah. Who do you take in those games? Alabama versus Notre Dame, Clemson, Ohio State, and then.
Yeah. I think as far as the college football playoff goes, I mean, no one has really seemed to be able to kind of match what Alabama is bringing to the table week in and week out. So I think they're probably my favorite to win the national championship. I think we get another Alabama-Clemson rematch. And if that happens, I think that will be, I know people are getting tired of seeing that game year after year, but I think we're going to see, if those two teams kind of collide, I think you're going to see a great game again. I would anticipate Alabama kind of coming out on top there, but I think we got a little bit of a reminder, I think this past weekend, as far as how good Clemson is when Trevor Lawrence is in the lineup and when he's playing. And so I think that game is much closer than I think maybe some people might expect coming into that game. And I don't think anyone would ever expect a blowout or even like a double-digit victory for Alabama. But I think that game is going to be very, very competitive if that's what we see for the national championship. That's my pick. I think we'll go with Alabama to win that game. I just think that the firepower that they possess on offense is hard to match right now with the way that they're playing. But if anybody can do it, it's Clemson. But I think I would give Alabama the slight nod there. As far as the Fiesta Bowl goes, I think it really is going to boil down to the play at quarterback for Oregon. I think we know what Iowa State is bringing. I think they have been a team that's been pretty consistent throughout the season, save for kind of that first game of the year. I think that they have more or less kind of maintained their level of play throughout the year. So I think you kind of know what you're going to get if you're an Oregon fan facing Iowa State. I think you don't really know what you're going to get out of the quarterback position for the Ducks. And so I think if they get some steady play from the quarterback position and they're able to kind of continue to make plays on defense like they've been doing these last couple of outings, then I think you see Oregon with the talent advantage potentially coming out on top. I think if I have to make a prediction right now, I would probably give the slight edge to Iowa State. I just think there's fewer question marks there. They got a really strong running game, and that's been an area where Oregon has struggled this season. If you're looking for a score, I see something along the lines of 24-21 in favor of Iowa State. I think it's a close game. I think it's one of the better games of the bowl season. But at this point, I have too many questions about Oregon's quarterback situation to kind of give them the nod in this game.
So that's now. Who did you pick? Iowa. Oregon versus USC.
I picked USC in that game.
Oh, okay. So, hey.
So I could be going over 2 here on my predictions, but I think the defense for Oregon showed me something against USC. So I'm a little bit more inclined to probably pick Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl, but I think again, with Oregon's the uncertainty at the quarterback position for the Ducks right now, and you really don't want to see that going into a game against Iowa State, where they've got a very, very sound defense, and they've got a quarterback on the other end who's playing at a very, very high level right now, one of the better quarterbacks in the country. And when you got that type of advantage, or you've got that type of stability, I guess, coming into a game like this one, and Iowa State's going to be fired up, I think that you have to give them credit for that, and that's kind of where I'm shaking out on this one. I think it's a close game again, but I think Iowa State kind of has the edge in this game.
Okay. My quick predictions. Call me a Big Ten guy. I actually think, and they've only played 6 games, and I don't think they've looked great this year, but they have one of the best quarterbacks in college football, and they fought like hell to get this season. The season got postponed. If Justin Fields and Chris Olave and Jamison Williams and Garrett Wilson, all that talent they have on that offensive side of the ball, when they come back to play Clemson, they lost last year, and this is one of the main reasons they fought to get back. I think they're going to go out and they're going to beat Clemson, and I actually think they're going to beat Alabama.
Wow.
And I think it's going to be one of those things that, people are picking Alabama. People think it's Alabama versus Clemson, and Ohio State is sitting there saying, we have the good dogs on our side of the ball, and we can go out there and we can play. And it would be such a COVID year to have an 8-0 champion. And, the narrative out there will be that they played less games and they get beaten down, and that's all good and dandy. But, yeah, I think Ohio State wins the national title. So you're probably not going to hear that prediction very many places. I just think they have the talent, and then I think because they were able to get in and they fought so hard and just the adversity, and then they're kind of being downplayed. I just think they end up winning it. When it comes to Iowa State, this one's tough for me. My heart wants to say Oregon. I loved what I saw the last game and how they the physicality, those guys they playing fast, getting after it. It was the best that I'd seen Oregon play. I just liked how that team looked, Culture. You've stated several times, and I completely agree. This play of Tyler Shuck is a little worrisome. He has not gotten better. He's gotten worse. His confidence isn't good. Will he be the one playing? Won't he be? Iowa State also runs a very interesting defense. They 3-3-5, the odd front. They move in with the three safeties, and they move the safety in the box. They do some things that a quarterback that is not confident in his abilities, Matt Campbell knows how to utilize. Maybe he doesn't have the talent, but he schemes around it by putting kind of these funny different fronts and funny pressures and safety blitzes, and then he even brings a corner and drops the safety over to the corner. He does some schematic things that one of the better coaches in that regards in how he utilizes what he has on the offensive side. He's kind of on the defensive side, and he does the same in the offense. He runs a unique offense. He sometimes has 3 tight ends out there. And that Kohler is one of the better tight ends in the game. And so he knows he doesn't have these 5-star wide receivers. He knows he doesn't have 5-star DBs. So he knows how to just cause this confusion. And when you have a quarterback that doesn't seem very confident, when he's looking at this confusion going on back there, I don't know if that's the best game to get your confidence back. Even you saw what California did, and Wilcox's ability to cause a lot of different looks in the back end. You saw Herbert struggle with it when he played against Cal. So I don't know. At the same time, I think the defense played very well. Brock Purdy turns the ball over. You saw, I don't know if you saw the Big 12 Championship. They had a chance to possibly take the lead at the end. He did one of the most stupid plays ever on 3rd down. He just literally threw a 500 ball up, and Oklahoma wins it. But he tends to do that. I've seen him do it a couple other games this year. So I'm doing it against Louisiana. He made some really boneheaded plays that put them in a hole in that game. And you saw the defense. They played very well. They forced 3 turnovers. Eddie Avalos when he's had his good games as a defensive coordinator, it's getting after the pass rusher, being able to cause confusion back there, forcing turnovers, and Purdy will turn the ball over. And so if he turns the ball over and Oregon forces turnovers and puts themselves in the plus advantage in that way, you saw what they did. They just beat USC based on that premise alone. So I don't know. It's a hard game for me to pick. I'm gonna go Oregon. I'm gonna say they force a couple turnovers, and I think whether they're able to utilize it and take advantage of those, and that's where I'm gonna go. I'm going with my heart a little bit. I'm not feeling super confident in this one, but when I'm on the fence, I always go with my heart. If it's like struggle, so I'm gonna go.
Not a bad strategy.
I don't even know what to pick for a score. Yeah, I am really interested to see this game because what's Tyler Shuck going to be? How good a coach is Campbell? How difficult is that for Oregon to be able to scheme against? This is fun, and it's a last game of the year. It's been a crazy year, and we're pretty much representative of the Pac-12. So I'm beyond excited for the game. So.
Yeah, it should be a good game. I'm expecting it to be certainly one of the closer, more competitively kind of matched games during bowl season. I think both teams are going to be really motivated to play well. And again, I mean, it's a Fiesta Bowl, and for Iowa State, this is might as well be the national championship game for them. So that's I don't think you can discount that. And I think Oregon too. I think, beating USC, I think they've got a kind of a new lease on life, if you will, in terms of their outlook on the season and kind of what they can accomplish this year. I think you're going to see 2 really motivated teams in Glendale kind of going head to head there, and we'll see what happens. I think it is about as coin flip a game as you're going to find.
I agree with you, man. All right, dude. Well, thanks for coming on today, man. Took this 2-hour podcast talking Ducks, talking Pac-12. I could do this any time, so it was fun. I'm looking forward to the Fiesta Bowl, college football playoff season in general, and this year we got fingers crossed a little bit. We just every time you're like, are they going to pass their test? Is it going to happen? I mean, it's a daily thing. You're already seeing some teams not able to practice because of COVID outbreaks. So hopefully the game happens, and hopefully it is as good as we think it's going to be. All right, dude. Chris, thanks for coming on today, and you have a wonderful night.
Yeah, you too, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
No problem, man.